Now, if we look at how these three individual elements are rendering in the browser, these three asides inside of our section main area, it's hard to understand why the creating a modern atmosphere div is up next to this content here. And the issue is that each one of these asides has a float property. So don't follow along here. I want to add some HTML content here just to show you what's going on, but I don't want you to add this to your project. So back inside of the HTML file, I'm going to find this section with a class of main. I'm going to add a paragraph element inside of here, and I'm just going to type in, I'm inside the main section. Then I'll go back to my CSS file. I'm going to find section main here, and I'm temporarily going to put in a background color. So I'll type background color, and I'll just put in a light gray. So with those in place, I'll come back to the browser and I'll hit reload. So here's what we're going to see. The main section is only as tall now as that particular paragraph element because the paragraph element doesn't have any float properties. So basically, the section of main is not going down to extend around all of the items that are floating inside of it, because whenever we float or position an element, the parent container will not extend to the height or width of the items inside. The only reason that this is going the full width here is because a section item has a block property, which means it will take up the entire width of the browser. So what we need to do is have another HTML element in the page with a clear property so that the parent item will clear all of the floating items. But I don't want to add any HTML to our page. I only want the HTML to be as minimal as possible and only relate to the content. So we can use something called a pseudo element inside of CSS to add a phantom HTML element to our sections. So let's go back to our CSS file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up here in the section area. I'm going to add this phantom element or pseudo element to all of the sections because we're going to float other items in other sections later on. So the way that we define a pseudo element is to type section, and you can use either 1 colon or 2 colons. Both are supported. Typically, web designers and web developers will use 2 colons just as a visual indication to them that they're defining a pseudo element versus a pseudo class like colon hover down here. So we have section, 2 colons, then the word after, which means we want to add a phantom HTML element after all of the other items. Let's put in our brackets. And now the one property we have to have in any pseudo element is a content property. So we'll type content, colon, then I'll add 2 tick marks, and you can use single or double quotes. Now we're not going to put anything in here, we're going to leave it blank, but we do need to define this. And later on in the course, we are actually going to put content in there and add content to our elements with CSS. But for now, I just want an empty element, then a space. Next we'll set a display type of block. So it's almost like we're adding an invisible paragraph, heading, or div element. And then a space, and then lastly, we're going to set a clear property of both, which will make all of the section elements tall enough to clear all the items inside that have a float property. Now with that in place, let's go back to the browser. Let's hit reload. Now we'll see we get our margin property here because the section main is now encompassing all of the items inside that have float properties. And now that this item is as tall as it needs to be for all of its children, we also get back the margin bottom property we said earlier. So in your project, you're going to add this pseudo element here, section colon after, content blank, display block, and clear both. I'm going to remove the background color that I added just to demonstrate this. And I'm also going to go back to the HTML and remove that paragraph element as well. So once you've added your pseudo element and you've cleared all the floats inside of your section main, we're going to move on to style the atmosphere section.